Good morning and welcome to the 9:30 call. For whatever reason this week, I've gotten more people saying, like, you do this 4 days a week? I said, yep. So this is a special edition of the sharing the microphone on a Thursday. We usually save Wednesday. Um, but we had the secretary yesterday. So thanks everybody who joined for that call. We sent the chat over. The recording is available in all three languages, thanks to the incredible work of Neri Garcia, our director of communications, who, as you can imagine, has three computers recording in three different languages. So thanks to Neri for that. So today what we thought we would do is just start with a high-level overview of what happened in the Senate. So the Senate released their budget last week, last Tuesday. Amendments were due by 3 p.m. on Friday. And I haven't seen how many total amendments were filed. Maybe Victoria Bergeron knows. Do you know, Victoria?
I want to say like 1100. I can double check.
So there were 1,100 potentially, but amendments filed to the Senate budget. There were 1,700 filed to the House. And so we're just going to go quickly over kind of what happened, where we are in the process. We're going to put a link in chat too, because the Senate will start its debate next Tuesday. And so we want that senators need to hear from folks about that we're paying attention and for what amendments to sponsor, excuse me, to support as we get to the final. Oh, all right. Thanks, Victoria. So almost 1,200. No, I guess it's only 1,100 um amendments. But that means that 1,158 amendments to be considered. We'll also put the link in the chat of where you can see all the amendments. The Senate color codes them and puts them by topic area. But Shakira, I know you have slides, and let's 9:30 callers also give a lot of love and appreciation to Shakira. She started with us in September as a Policy Pathways Fellow. And she has been leading the budget process. Marissa left on maternity leave on March 30th, and Shakira has done an incredible job learning and also making information accessible to folks. So lots of appreciation in chat. Brian Gold, how many amendments, Rep and Senator, and what topic wins on most amendments? I don't know. We'll have to go to that. Shakira, I'll turn things over to you or to us. I'll help. And you're muted. And are you trying to share screen? Is it is possible?
Okay.
All right. And then Victoria, thank you, put their breakdown in. And Victoria also put when you are doing your Senate overview, because we rely on that, and then we'll have a budget breakdown with neighborhood villages.
And I included the link to Victoria's
Oh, perfect.
um, briefing on June 4th in the last slide as well. So this will be shared afterwards.
Yep. So we'll put this in the 9:30 call follow-up folder. Um, all right, go ahead, Shakira.
Okay. So just gonna do a quick overview of the Senate FY27 budget proposal. These are some of the key takeaways. So the Senate Ways and Means budget proposal provides about 1.86 billion in funding for early education and care. The House and Senate budget proposals are mostly the same. They level fund most early education and care line items, which we include on the next slide. They maintain the current caseloads for childcare financial assistance while annualizing the reimbursement rate increases from FY26. Now, the main differences, there's no funding for Reach Out and Read, the EEC higher education or career pathways, and there's no funding for reimbursement rate increase. It also decreases funding for the EEC administration line item and increases funding for CPPI. So, like I said, C3 is level funded at 475 million. The
And Shakira,
CCFA.
as you're going through this, just for folks to see the three column. So the first column is what happened last year in the fiscal year 26 budget. Then Shakira has the House, which was voted on, and now this is where we are in the Senate. So
Mhm.
it's easy to see where the differences are in this chart. And then once the Senate finalizes their budget, we're gonna kind of change the top of that column.
Yes, thanks, Amy. So yeah, CCFA
Yeah.
funding amount will increase pay for current capacity, anticipated growth in the DTA, DCF caseloads, and annualized FY26 provider reimbursement rates through providing 623.6 million for income eligible childcare and 597.2 million for DCF and DTA related childcare. Um, the Senate provides 28.45 million for CPPI and summer step up in comparison to the House that only provided 5 million. Now, the EEC administration line item, like I said, significant cut at 9.37 million in comparison to the House's proposing 20.2 million. And in FY26, they received 11.52 million, but this is including earmarks. Resource and referral agencies, Head Start, are both, and the CFCE grants are all level funded. The early childhood mental health supports also level funded. And then, like I said, career pathways has no funding. And then early educator scholarships are also proposing level funded in the Senate budget. Parent Child Plus, level funded, and then a slight decrease for after school and out of school time, and then no funding for Reach Out and Read. And just
And
feel free to stop me
as,
if
Sha-
there's questions.
as Shakira's going through, so if you look at the Parent Child Plus program, the House right now and the Senate are the same. So if there's an amendment to add money to that, it could actually, can you go back one slide to C3?
Mhm.
So C3 is pretty consistent. So we'll talk about the next step, which is the conference committee, and the conference committee looks at differences in the budget. So it's differences in the numbers and the language. So we don't go into all of the language here, but even so right now it's 475 in the House and it's 475 in the Senate. And were there any amendments for C3, Shakira?
There were three amendments for
Oh, right.
C3 around changes to the equity adjustment for the formula, and then
Right. So
also requiring a formula change in FY27. And there's a third one, but I don't
but that's fine.
remember. I think it's the public-private
Oh, right.
something.
So while the money is the same, some of the language would have to be decided on because the language might be different in the two proposals. So yes, Brian Dixon, the debate starts on Tuesday. But even after the Senate debate, they're going to look across. So the conference committee's job is to look for the differences in numbers and language, and then they negotiate the differences in that. And so some things we call it are conferenceable, where you can see there are different line item amounts. And so we know kind of at the end, as long, with the amendments, some things may change, but we'll know where there are differences. So what is up for to be kind of resolved to the conference committee. If the numbers and the language are the same, then that's kind of what you end up in the final budget. And we'll talk more about that in the next step. But just so people know, now is the time to talk to your senators because they'll be I just put the link in chat so you can see all the amendments, and then we'll get to the conference committee. And the conference committee is three members of the House, three members of the Senate, and they will work together along with the team to go through differences. And then Brian has a question about EEC administration.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes there have been programs put as earmarks in the EEC administration. Um, where is that? Can you go back to the EEC administration line item, just the differences? Okay. So so last year they had 11.52.
Yeah. So
The
like the
House
educator
proposed,
scholarships were earmarked in EEC
right.
administration line item along with a few other earmarks. And so 11.52 is not the total that's going specifically to EEC.
So you just have to so you'd have to look at each of the line items and what the language was. As Shakira said, the numbers may include earmarks that they're in that line item, but they're not supporting the actual EEC administration, if that makes sense. Okay, you want to go to the next. So Shakira's going to go into the next part. So we have the kind of FY27 operating budget. And then now we have another budget process. That's the fair share supplemental budget, which are the additional extra dollars that have been collected through the fair share surtax. And then they are both the House and Senate are using this budget process to almost make the whole budget whole, if that makes sense. And Victoria, if I say anything that is not accurate, please stop me.
So both the House and the Senate, similar to the governor, proposed transferring 150 million into the high quality early education and care affordability fund. Um, and then key differences, the House provides funding for the CCFA income eligible waitlist, 10.7 million of which is for new income eligible contracts. This will open approximately 2,000 slots, but it's really depending on like the child's age and type of care because we know that the rates are different. Um, Loan forgiveness, the House proposes 7.5 million, 8 million for early educators' personal childcare, which is childcare financial assistance for early educators, and then the Senate proposes 15 million in for early literacy and literacy lunch initiative. I don't know if there's questions there.
There are questions. Chat is so hard to read. Good question on the breakdown by okay, that's the legislative. The Senate categories up. Okay, okay. Thank you, Victoria. Regarding the supplemental, 12.5 of the 23 million is to maintain current caseload, and 10.7 is for new slots. Elsa's asking if that's true.
That is a good question. I want to say yes, but someone on the call may know better than me.
Right, Victoria, or is Adam here?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does get very confusing trying to compare the two bills, but my understanding is that the funding that is included in the supplemental budget is mostly for new slots to get kids off the wait list. I think there might be an exception. There was an earmark for uh, $8 million for early educator personal childcare that might
Mhm.
go to existing kids in that category. But I think a majority of that is intended to expand versus the money that is included in the operating budget is just to maintain capacity.
Thanks. Because the House in total included 38.7 million. And then within that was the 7.5 for the loan forgiveness, 8 million for the early educator, which leaves about 23.2 for the CCFA income eligible.
Yeah.
I mean, the highlights of this slide is just to see the differences, right? To see kind of how they're organizing the funding and kind of what they're proposing.
Okay. And so these are the amendments that we're tracking for early education and care. Um, there is two amendments for CPPI and summer step up. There is one for access management, another for Head Start, and another for increasing rates for family childcare. The differences between the two for CPPI and summer step up, one would include an additional 1 million for summer step up. So allowing for an increase for summer step up as well as an increase for CPPI, whereas the second one would level fund summer step up and increase access to CPPI grants. Um, and then more amendments for early education and care. There is an amendment to restore funding to reach out and read, amendments to increase funding for Parent Child Plus, after school and out of school time, and then another amendment for the EEC line item to earmark Jumpstart, and then an amendment to add 10 million for the early literacy initiative. And so we've sent out a click to email campaign, pretty like simple, takes like a minute or two. I put a screenshot of what it looks like. It's just how you can support early education care related amendments in the Senate Ways and Means budget proposal. You put in your information and your state senator pops up and it sends a message to them asking them to support these amendments in the budget or co-sponsor these amendments in the budget. And so next steps, I think Amy kind of went through this, but right now, the Senate is going to debate next week, and then they will vote on the full budget. And then after that, we go into conference committee, where the House and the Senate have to decide on like negotiating the differences between the two budgets. And so, like Amy kind of highlighted, like they're looking at both numbers and languages, and that process is taking place in the month of June. Um, since there's so many similarities between the two budgets, I don't know if that like will take less time. And so we'll actually have a budget for July 1st, or if like outside sections and policy pieces might push it a little further out.
Hope springs eternal, but I think there probably are places in the budget. I think especially because we have like the operating budget and the fair share supplemental budget moving at the same time. There's a lot to understand and appreciate.
But yep.
Oh, that's an important part. So if an amendment for an earmark, is it a recommendation for added funds? So that's really tricky because sometimes you get focused on like, I want this money, but if you don't increase the line item, then you're basically saying you still only get this money. And let's say it's for 10 million and the earmark is for 2 million, that means there's only 8 million for that kind of the original part of the line item.
From what I've noticed and like just going through the process when I looked through like the amendments for the House, they do increase the funding in the line item. And then some of the amendments, when you're reading it, like the senator who filed it actually will say like replace this funding amount with this new funding amount, which
Right.
usually counts for that earmark.
It's a hard to track process because the house does all of their pieces, but there's very rarely something that's called final with all the changes. You're constantly like you're updating documents, you're replacing language, you're replacing numbers. So that's why the charts are really helpful to say like what actually happened, how can I follow along? And then it's good practice. If you're going to do an earmark, you want to make sure that you are thinking holistically about that line item. Um, the other piece I think we have to remember is that the budget is the document that allocates the dollars to the agencies, and then the agencies have to follow the language of the budget. So that's why the language is so critical. It's not just like we have this much money to spend on X. There's often language to say how, what are the requirements of that language? And so we know that we have to advocate to the legislature because they decide the funding levels and language, and then the EEC, for example, or DESI are they have to then get the money out. It's like they're given instructions on how to do it.
Is there any value in doing advocacy with senators at this stage for anything other than conferenceable items where less money than House or amendments? Like, for example, no value in advocating for C3 because the money is the same in each of the proposals.
Right. I would say that's true. I think we're not going to see an increase in C3 dollars, right? 475 has been pretty consistent.
Basically, where the numbers are the same, it's going to be the final budget unless an amendment passes. But there was no amendments for funding for C3 if you're going with that example.
Well, and Victoria, can they add dollars if the numbers, oh, we have this question almost every year. So if it's 475, can they in conference committee say, forget it, we're going to do 500 million?
I mean, in theory, they can do anything.
Right. Okay.
But I think in practice, like
They won't.
Shakira said, when the numbers match, they don't look at that again. They
Right.
go to the areas where the numbers don't match and
Right.
kind of negotiate on that end.
I'm just making sure there's no other questions. Brian Gold.
Hi, just a Two quick shout outs. One is to say, the budget has gotten more and more complex over time with fair share and multiple different facets. And the fact that you all, Victoria and Mass taxpayers and neighborhood villages are able to make it accessible to everybody is amazing. And thank you very much for that. And also the fact that like what you have is a group of folks that we've built that you've built through the 930 call that is able to now ask really detailed questions about the budget and go to bat for advocacy is a huge testament to what this community has built over 6+ years. So thank you to everybody.
Thanks, Brian. That's such a good point. Shakira and I have been meeting with folks up at the State House, and I think like we also any information that we get, we're going to share with you, right? Like as we are learning more about the inside, because so much of this is not written down on paper anywhere. You have to check the vibes, you have to check the clues. The budget process is also sending messages. It's also not perfect, right? If you think about the job that they're trying to do, they're writing all of this legislative language. So sometimes things are left over from a former budget. So when you read it, you have to kind of be discerning, but also forgiving to understand what what the intent is that they're trying to do. So thanks for that, Brian. But it is true; it has made such a difference. We heard from Rep Vargas on Tuesday night at the Advocacy Network, and he was talking about like the shift in the building, like how you're just hearing more about these issues. All right, Shakira, back to you.
Okay. Just the last slide, just resources. So like Victoria mentioned, they're having a briefing June 4th on the Early Education Conference preview. So I can put that link in the chat, or Victoria might have put it already in the chat. Neighborhood villages and strategies for children will be having their next budget breakdown on the Senate budget proposal and conference committee on June 10th. So we will share that link out. And then just access to resources, neighborhood villages, budget materials, strategies for children's advocacy HQ toolkit. And that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Shakira. Brian Dixon wondered, do we see anything based on our experience that might slow down budget negotiations? Victoria, what are you thinking about for the full budget?
I think the supplemental budget is probably where we'll see the most kind of back and forth there, the most differences there, not just in the education space, but in a lot of other areas. As we've kind of been talking about, the base House Senate budgets for 27 are pretty similar. So we might see some, discussions around policy things. But I would anticipate the biggest challenge being to negotiate the supplemental budget, um, and just how like the surtax gets split up and stuff like that.
And I think also we keep hearing like barring any kind of disaster coming from the federal level, right? Like there's been a lot of conversations about the rainy day fund. Is it raining? They have not kind of accessed that yet. I think what we're hearing that right, while things are tough and there certainly are challenges, I think the consensus at the State House is right now it's not raining and they're really reluctant because once that you use that money, it's not available. So, um,
Something else we've been talking about too is there are ballot questions coming
oh,
up
right.
that would also have an effect on the state budget if passed. So just thinking about, our policymakers thinking ahead to the possibility of trying to react to those. Um, the stabilization fund in that scenario as well. So there's a lot of questions around, yeah, federal action and then also just action here at the state that could definitely impact our fiscal situation.
And there are factors that have been like in their mind that they've done this whole process. And so I think to Victoria's point, like they got to this point. So then now like with all those factors in mind, so I think and then like you said, the fair share supplemental is where the most differences is. All right. Well, we have 2 minutes left. Everyone, please thank Shakira in chat and with emojis of her work that she's been doing following the budget process. Please. And then if anybody has any other announcements, here on the 9:30 call, please share. Oh, I love to see all the emojis. Any other, and it's hard to know if people are thumbs upping or raising their hand or clapping. Any other updates or announcements here?
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Harold.
Just want to tell everybody that tonight we're going to have, not tonight, the following week on Wednesday, the 20th, we're going to have Ivy Solomon and Noemi Custodia Lora from Urban College of Boston talking about all the things that Urban College is offering in Spanish to all the early education community, okay? So just tune
Thanks,
in, tell
Harold.
everybody that we're going to have that amazing guest.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And yesterday, after the secretary left the 9:30 call, we know that he was at the EEC board meeting. He gave a shout out both to the 9:30 call and the 9:30 call in Espanol about joining that. And just so folks know, we are working for the fall to have the commissioner join a special 9:30 call in Espanol and Portuguese, so that it would be at night and it would be kind of the two calls coming together to hear from the commissioner. So we're really excited about that as well.
So, and the commissioner said that she might bring the secretary
The
with.
secretary, right.
Yes.
And we also are booking for June, July, and August. Somebody asked me recently, like, how do you find all the people? I said I'm a talent scout. So, we're also featuring many people from the research summit of their poster sessions. We're gonna have a couple sharing the mics just dedicated to that. And then folks who are earning their PhDs to talk more about the dissertations that they are defending or have defended. So please send any ideas or speakers that you have. We're always looking for folks to join us. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks again to Shakira and to Victoria for your support as we went through that. We will be back on Monday with Sarah Savage, who's going to talk to more about research that she's done at the Federal Reserve of Boston. All right, we'll see you all on Monday. Thanks so much.